All right, welcome in, writers, creators, architects of the imagination. Let's just step right into the shadows for today's masterclass. We're doing a deep dive, an explainer really, into a dark legend that is practically tailor-made for your creative minds. We are going to deconstruct how to build the ultimate psychological antagonist, a killing figure known as the Pale Inquisitor. Now, this isn't your run-of-the-mill villain trying to, blow up the world. No, this is a spectral entity that wants to freeze the very soul. If you want to write an antagonist who embodies internal dread and just absolute suffocating control, you absolutely need to understand the anatomy of this legend.
Okay, let's dive into this. Every great Gothic antagonist needs a domain that perfectly reflects their internal state, right? Well, our source texts give us an absolutely brilliant starting point. I want you to imagine a desolate expanse deep within the inner psyche, a place where the winds of memory howl against the cliffs of reason. Wow, it's incredibly evocative, isn't it? As writers, we want our settings to do some really heavy lifting, and this bleak borderland of gray mist, it immediately establishes this tone of total isolation and, well, agonizing vigil. It's really the perfect blueprint for building a world that mirrors psychological turmoil.
Which brings us to Act 1, the architecture of guilt. We're shifting away from the transparent, brittle delusions of the architect's glass fortress and moving right into something with a heavy, leaden finality.
You might have designed antagonists before who rule from a place of fragile ego, but the Pale Inquisitor represents a terrifying shift. He offers the absolute finality of the law. And the centerpiece of this terrifying domain is the Iron Bridge. Get this, the Inquisitor doesn't walk on it, he actually drifts above it. He demands that the seeker, the protagonist of your dark tragedy, stand perfectly, and I mean literally perfectly still upon this bridge, suspended over a bottomless abyss. Just think about the unsettling metaphor you can use for your own stories here. He punishes even the shadow of a doubt. The absolute rigidity required to not fall into that abyss creates such a profound Gothic tension. Any movement, any breath of defiance just invites destruction.
So let's break down the psychological archetype here. The Pale Inquisitor is defined as the superego pushed to its most necrotic extreme. If you're taking character development notes, jot this down. He is not a gentle guide. He's definitely not the voice of a healthy conscience. Instead, he's more of a martyr, but one wrapped in the heavy, iron-linked chains of absolute law. He represents that toxic extreme of morality, where trying to be perfect actually turns into a tool for self-mutilation.
Moving on to Act 2, the spectral frozen silhouette. Let's look at the actual visual design here, because this judge is carved from the very geometry of guilt itself. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how his physical description totally embodies his philosophy. He isn't a creature of flesh and blood. He's a silhouette of ash and cold resolve. And he's draped in robes of iron filings. I mean, imagine the sound, the bleak, heavy imagery of that. Plus, every single step he takes through the soul's borderlands is marked by the tolling of a spectral bell. That auditory cue is absolutely crucial. It's designed to strike fear into any wayward thoughts that dare to stray from the path of order. It's such a great trick for building dread before your antagonist even utters a single word. And that leads us to Act 3, the Untamed Silver Wolf. Here's where we get into the central conflict of our theatrical tragedy. Because let's be honest, an antagonist is really only as compelling as the force they're opposing. The Inquisitor demands hollow uniformity, right? But the Silver Wolf? That represents the soul's raw, chaotic noise and unrefined desires, the actual hunger of the primal self. To the Inquisitor, this wild nature isn't just some instinct you manage. It's a full-blown contagion that has to be purged. He views these human desires as gross stains upon the purity of his cosmic design. It's an incredible dynamic to play with, rigid, necrotic law just endlessly clashing with unpredictable, vibrant life. So the crucial point is really how this guy operates. In his domain, existence is essentially a process of subtraction. He doesn't want to understand the seeker's hunger, he wants to prune it. He cuts away every wild thread of individuality until all that's left is this rigid, hollow uniformity. He's purifying through erasure, basically flattening the chaotic threads of fate into one singular, motionless line of duty. For your characters, this means that under his regime, true virtue can only be found in the total silence of the grave. Up next is Act 4, the Ledger of Regret. Let's talk about the eternal, sleepless task of keeping this system going.
The Inquisitor literally never sleeps because he believes the silence of the gods can only be appeased by unyielding justice. He's this eternal sentinel carrying a ledger, and get this, it's written in the ink of regret. Just look at what's in here. Every instance of betrayal, every single moment of cowardice, every forbidden impulse, and the absolute deepest disharmonious desires of the soul. He's recording the darkest internal secrets. You really have to understand that in this psychological landscape, suffering isn't just a symptom of the journey. No, suffering is the currency of the absolute. It's the only coin he accepts.
This brings us to Act 5, the self-imposed prison. We are now entering the climax of the narrative, examining some deep, agonizing irony. And this brilliantly illustrates the essential tragic flaw of our villain. The architect of the internal scourge is ultimately trapped by his own design. The source text puts it perfectly. His relentless pursuit of purity is the very fire that sustains the darkness he seeks to erase. I mean, wow, he is hunting the shadows of his own creation. He's a prisoner of his own morality, forever trapped in this cold, unforgiving landscape he built. Realizing that your villain's greatest strength is simultaneously their ultimate trap, that's a total masterstroke in character design. Which brings us right back to that bottomless abyss beneath the Iron Bridge. What is the Inquisitor actually afraid of? When we contrast the rigid law against the unpredictable abyss, we find his greatest fear. He doesn't fear the abyss just because it's dark. He's terrified of it because it's literally the only place where his rigid laws hold no sway. He is absolutely petrified of the uncontrollable, of those chaotic spaces where his absolute justice just cannot penetrate. Let's move to the next concept and see how this builds to his ultimate downfall. You see, the law he upholds isn't actually a foundation for anything to grow. It's just a barrier. It's a wall built to keep the storm of the chaotic self at bay. But here's the thing. Absolute stillness is completely unnatural. Eventually, this absolute law just crumbles under the overwhelming weight of its own suffocating stillness. The harder he tries to force the human spirit into this rigid tapestry of perfection, the more violently it's eventually going to fracture.
And that drops us right into Act 6, the empty, fragile throne. This is where we bring the Gothic legend back to its core psychological lesson. So what is the actual point of this spectral judge's endless vigil? Well, the horrifying truth about the Pale Inquisitor is that he's guarding a throne that has been empty for an eternity. He is the ultimate monument to the fear of one's own freedom. He's maintaining this agonizing, exhausting vigil, enforcing these punishing laws, pruning away the self. And it's all for a ruler that simply isn't there. The kingdom is just a hollow shell.
As you sit down to outline your own psychological narratives, please remember this profound connection. The judge, the bridge, the heavy law, they're merely shattered pieces. They're reflections of a fragmented spirit. They're basically defense mechanisms gone completely rogue, just waiting for a soul brave enough to recognize them for what they are, and to forge them back into a whole, healthy identity. That empty throne, that is the fragmented identity waiting to be claimed.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a challenge for your characters and, honestly, for yourselves. When faced with the crushing weight of absolute law and the necrotic extreme of your own inner critic, what will your protagonist do? Will you remain frozen, perfectly still on the Iron Bridge of guilt, terrified of your own untamed desires? Or will you brave the terrifying freedom of the chaotic abyss to forge yourself whole? Think about that. Keep writing, keep exploring the shadows, and I'll see you in the next masterclass.